Hello everyone, my name is Zohaib. This is an overview tutorial for AI Shapes Blender and I will show you how this script and its functionality work. So first of all, I have unzipped all the files and installed the script in the script UI folder, which you will find in C drive, program files, Adobe, your After Effects version, sport files, scripts and script UI panels. I have already pasted the file here, you can do the same. And then you can run After Effects, go to your window menu and run the script from here. I have already opened and docked it on the left and also opened the file which I have provided for the samples and created this empty composition to start over. First of all, I show you how script works and what it actually does. Let's draw some paths to start. I draw some polygons here while holding the Alt key, so these are no longer the primitive objects and I have no need to convert these to Bezier paths by right clicking on these. You can also import Illustrator files and convert those to shape layers, or use any third-party plugins to import the shapes directly from the Illustrator. So now as we have created these paths, let's search the path properties and select these both and click on Create Blend button. You can see it created the blend and added some layers automatically for this to work. The first layer is calculation layer and you don't need to change anything on this, that is why it is hidden already. It controls all the calculations for the blend layers below. The second layer is the spine. You can redirect the blend using this and can modify the blended paths positions along it. And the third layer is for the blend, which contains all the blended shapes. This is the only layer that will render and the others are guide layers. But if you want to render any of this, then you can right click and deselect this option from here. So it will render now as well. And the last layer for the blend is master layer and it contains all the master paths which were collected when we created this blend. So these two shapes were added to the master layer. If we want, we can modify these shapes and the whole blend will be updated automatically. These shapes will always remain in the center of the spine. You can see as we change the shapes, these always shift to the center while the spine is enabled. But if we disable the spine, then they will stay wherever they are. And their position on spine works a bit differently for the opened and closed paths. For the closed paths, the shapes will always remain in the center of the spine by their anchor points. So now if we enable the spine, you can see the first shape's anchor point is here and the second shape's anchor point is here. But if we open all the paths with this button, you can see these are sticking now a little bit differently. And instead of the anchor points, the middle of the paths will stick to the spine. And no matter if we change the paths, these will always remain in the center. You can also disable the spine temporarily if you want to edit the paths conveniently without these moving around along the spine. I also would like to mention that I have used 10 shapes at the moment, but we can change these later as well. I would recommend to change these in steps to see how much your machine can handle easily. Let's undo the current operations and move forward towards the next controls. We have got some properties here that are based on these options. The blue ones which are active are actually the advanced properties, and the ones which are disabled are the simple properties. The simple properties won't have a lot of controls, but these will render faster. The first option is use default name. If this is enabled, then the script will automatically generate a name for the blend. Otherwise, you can disable this and give a custom name to the blend. I keep it as it is for now. Then we have number of shapes that we want to add to the blend. At the moment, I have 10 by default, but we can change it and click on update. And the blend will be updated with the new number of shapes. The next option is blend method and I have selected the spine at the moment. That means the objects will stick to the spine which was created while creating the blend. So when we change the shape of the spine, the objects will also move along its path. If we disable the spine from the effect controls preset, now these shapes are blending directly with each other. Let's enable it again. There is another checkbox, rotate along spine. If we enable this, then the objects will also rotate along the spine. If we modify the spine path now, the blended shapes rotations will also change according to the tangents on the spine. And these controls are specifically for the master paths. But at the moment we just have two master paths, so these won't make any difference because these will always affect the paths which were added additionally between these two master paths. We will come to this later. The next set of controls is offset controls for the blended paths. And here we can see the same controls as we have seen above for the master paths, but these will work a bit differently and will always affect all the shapes instead of in between shapes. And we can move this slider towards the right and to the left to stretch these shapes on the spine. We can also do this without the spine as well. You may also notice if we move the slider towards the right, the objects are moving towards the left. And this is because when we created the blend, we selected this path first and it became the first path in the blend as well, from where the blend starts. But we can reverse the order using this button and they will change their order in the blend as well. So now if we move the slider towards the right, the objects will also move to the right. And if we move towards the left, the object will also go to the left. Then we have scale property. We can also scale the shapes towards the left or towards the right. It can work over the stretched values which we have set above. We can also offset all the shapes group on the spine or without the spine. If I enable the spine, then you can see they will stick on the spine. So when the value will go from 0 to 100, it will create a complete loop and shapes will be back to their original position. Currently they are clamping on the edge, but if you enable loop offset, they will appear from the other side. And you can see if the shapes reach an end, they will appear from the other one. And if the value is 100, then they will be at their original position as they were before. It will loop only once. But if we enable this checkbox, then we can offset the phase as well, as many times as we want. I disable this for now and move to the next property. I reset these to their defaults and let's discuss the loop controls for the individual shapes. It works a bit differently than the above offset controls. The offset moves all the group of the shapes together, including any stretch or scale values applied to the blend. But these loop controls loop each shape individually with each other without affecting stretch, scale or offset values we applied above. To demonstrate that, I reset the values to their default and increase the stretch value. Now test the loop. You can see that each shape is taking the place of the shapes next to it or the previous one, based on in which direction we move the slider, towards the right or towards the left. The value of 360 will loop all the shapes in the number of times according to the total shapes in the blend. So if we set a keyframe here and set another keyframe after a second and we set its value to 1 full rotation. If we play now, you can see the speed is too fast because in this 1 second each shape is looped 15 times as there are total 15 shapes in the blend. To slow it down, you need to increase the timing of the keyframes or loop only the number of times as needed by calculating the loop value by dividing by the number of shapes. At the time we have 15 shapes and we have also disabled the last shape. Before moving forward, let's discuss what disable last shape does. When we change the loop value, then the last shape will jump to the start to continue its movement. But it will overlap the first shape which was already there. That is why this is enabled by default, and when we loop, the last shape won't overlap the first shape. So now let's move on to the calculation for the loop of a single shape. We need to divide 360 by the total number of shapes which are 15, but we will ignore one last shape which will overlap when we loop, and we have disabled that in the disable last shape checkbox. So we will subtract the 1 from it. Now press enter and we are left with the value of the loop for one shape, and it will create a perfect loop for all shapes. And we can also use loop out expression on these keyframes to loop this continuously. You may also notice some jumping on the edges as the shapes disappear and appears abruptly from the other end. We can also fix this using opacity controls, and we will discuss it later when we will add some advanced controls. The next control group is fill controls. At the moment we have simple controls for the fill, and we can just change one color and opacity for it. But if you want advanced controls, then you can select the properties that you want to convert to advanced and click on update blend, and any property which was selected will be converted to advanced control. Now you can see we have more options, so we can completely enable or disable the fill for the shapes, or we can have two colors instead of one. For your convenience, it is selected to 1 by default. If you want to change the color of the full blend, then you just need to change the color of the one. Or if you want two colors, then you can select two and select the second color from here. You can also change the opacity from here. You can see our blend has two colors now. We can also use two opacities for the fill the same way, and it can start from 0 to 100. At the time I have noticed that fill 1 is under fill 2, but it will be fixed in the final script. We haven't discussed this checkbox yet, and you will find it in other controls as well. To demonstrate that, I change the fill to more prominent colors so we can notice the change easily. So now if limit fill to shapes is checked, then if we move the shapes or change their offset values, the fill will be calculated as per the individual shape and will stick to that, no matter how we change their positions. But if we disable limit fill to shapes, then it will be calculated along the spine. And now if we move the shapes, you can see it is being applied on the spine instead of shapes, and shapes will get color as per their position on the spine. So if we move these shapes towards the right, it will become more blue, and if we move it towards the left, it will become more white. In the same way, it will work in the other options like stroke, opacity and twist. We can enable or disable the stroke completely using this checkbox, and we can choose if we want to use one color or two. We can also use two types of widths for this, and opacities as well. And here are the opacity controls that we can use to create seamless blend loops or to trim out any shapes from the start or end of the blend. So first I reset the offset values to their defaults and also remove the looping. The overall opacity is set to 100 for the whole blend. It will affect all shapes. Or to trim out the shapes, we can set opacity start or end values. To remove shapes from the end, we can decrease the opacity end value. And the fall off will feather out the opacity and the shapes will disappear gradually. Now if we change the value for opacity start and the end, you can see they are fading out gradually now from both ends. So let's create a loop now and calculate the value again for a single loop. Divide 360 by 14 as we have 15 shapes and we need to subtract the last shape which we have selected here as well. Press enter to calculate the value. I set the work area, and if I play now, you can see the shapes are looping seamlessly. You can play around further and make this more gradual by increasing the fall off value. Now it will be more pliant and smooth. If limit opacity to shapes is enabled, then the opacity will be applied to the individual shapes no matter wherever they are on the spine. But if we disable this, then the opacity will be applied over the spine and will only affect the shapes when they are on either edge of the spine. So if we move the shapes on the spine, you can see now if the shapes are in the center of the blend, they are not affected by the opacity, but as they move towards the edges, they will become transparent. I reset it back to 0. Now we move on to the twist controls. And this is the same checkbox we discussed in the above controls to make the twist stick to the individual shapes or the whole spine. For the time being, I keep it as it is. And if I change the value or twist start, then it will start twisting these shapes from the start of the blend, and the other one will twist the shapes from the end of the blend. And this time I used a negative value. Because we have fewer shapes, so this is not very clear. But we increase the number of shapes and update the blend. I change it back to one color so we can easily apply a single color stroke to the whole blend. Enable the stroke property to see the shape's edges as well. Now you can see easily how the shapes are twisting around the spine. If I scale to the right, then you can see the twist value is applied to all individual shapes and stick to them. But if we disable limit twist to shapes, then it will be applied on the spine and the objects will rotate according to their current position on the spine. So we have discussed some of these controls, and we can easily change or update these between simple and advanced properties for any of the selected blends. We can also update the number of shapes. To get the currently applied properties for any blend, select any one of its layers and click on Get Active Properties button. This way it will load those properties in the script panel and you can change or update those further. We can also change between blend methods or switch between simple and advanced properties as per your needs and click on the Update button to apply these changes. And the blend will be updated with the new properties as we have set here. Also, it doesn't matter which layer of the blend is selected, you can select any layer and can get its value or update it. The first group in additional functions is Vertices options, and the first option is Match Vertices. As the name suggests, it matches the vertices for different paths which have different numbers of vertices, and it is required for the blend to work properly. But as we have created the blend from scratch, then this script will also ask and match them automatically. And we can also use these functions on the blend or for the paths outside the blend by holding the control key. To show that, I hide these layers and let's create some paths. I create a single ellipse path while holding the Alt key. So it is no longer a primitive path but a simple path. And we draw another ellipse as well and add some points to this. I am adding these randomly. Now this shape has more points than this first one. If we now search for the path properties, and as these shapes are not part of the blend, then we can hold the control key as described in the tooltip. The incremental method will increase the number of vertices to the max number of vertices found in the selected paths. And the decremental method will reduce the number of vertices for all the paths to the minimum number of vertices found from any of them. I use the incremental method and control click the button. And you can see now they all have the same number of vertices while retaining their original shapes. I undo it to try the other method. This time we will try decremental. This shape's points will be removed to match the 4 points of this shape. So when I Ctrl Alt click as mentioned in the last option, you can see these shape points are reduced to 4 as the other shape, and it will change the shape as we have removed the points from it. And it doesn't matter how many shapes we have selected, it will work fine for multiple shapes as well. The next option is Shift Vertex. It will shift the vertex in forward or backward directions. We can use these key combinations to define in which direction it should move, forward or backward. So if we select this single shape, as this is outside of the blend, so if we hold Ctrl and click on the button, the vertex has moved towards the right as you can see here. This is the main vertex of the shape now. And the vertex also matters for the blend as the points blend with each other in different paths. If I click again while holding the Ctrl key, it will keep shifting in forward direction. Or if I hold the Alt key as well, then it will move backward. and we can select multiple shapes as well. You can see both shapes are changing their vertex at the same time. We can do the same for the blend without holding the control key. But mostly you won't need to shift the vertex for the whole blend, but only for the individual shapes to fix some vertex issues with some blended paths. This option will reverse the path's directions. You won't be able to notice it here. What it actually does is similar to this option. In fact, these options won't reverse the point values which create a path, but with this feature you can also reverse the point values in reality. This is also helpful to fix any path direction issues with any of the blended shapes. The next option is open and close paths. If I hold the control key and click, it will open all selected paths. And the next option is for closing all the paths outside the blend with Ctrl Alt click. We can open or close paths within or outside the blend using these key combinations. The next option is to replace the spine for the selected blend. At the moment, this is the spine of the current blend, which controls the blended path's directions. But we can also add a custom shape to replace this spine. To demonstrate that, I create a shape layer, or I can use the pen tool to draw a custom path for the spine. I need to select its path property and select any layer from the blend. Now if I click on replace spine button, you can see the spine is replaced with this new shape and it is added to the spine layer as well. So now we can edit this further as we like. The next option is add paths. We can add any additional paths to the blend using this. To see this in action, we need some shapes to add to the blend. I draw an ellipse path. You can see this path has 4 number of vertices, but our blended shapes have a maximum of 5, as in this polygon object. So we could add vertices manually, or if we try to add this to the blend, then it will also ask if it detects different number of vertices. To show this, I select the path and select the blend layer, and if you click add paths, it will ask that the number of vertices are different. So if you want to match, then click yes, and it will match the number of vertices automatically. Now you can see as we have enabled the spine, the newly added shape has been added to the end of the spine path. And the last shape is moved to the center, as in the spine method, shapes distributes automatically on the spine according to their paths order on the master layer. We can also change the positions of the paths from here. Now it is second and this polygon is moved to the end. I modify this shape a bit to show some other properties which we didn't discuss before. So if we go now to the master controls, then we can use these offset controls to change the position of any middle master paths on the spine. At the moment we have one, but it will work the same way as the blend controls do. The only difference is it will not affect the shapes on the edges, but only the paths between the first and the last shape. And these will only work if the spine is enabled. The blended paths will take the shape of the master path that is closest to them. As you can see how they are changing their shapes while we are moving the circle on the spine. If we disable the spine, then the paths will blend from their actual positions. So now if I change their positions manually, this one is the second path and this one is third. I move the third one a bit towards this side. Now instead of editing the spine, we need to change the position of the master paths. You may also notice the blend is not completed towards the last shape. This is because we have changed the offset values of the blend before. If we reset the scale value, now you can see the blend completely. This option removes any selected path from the blend. So if we select this ellipse, We need to be in edit mode to select the path property of any shape to remove it. This way we do not need to find the paths on the master layer and select from there. Or we could also search for the path property from here and then can select the paths that we need to remove. But I click on this point to select the path directly from here, and now if I click remove, it will be removed from the blend. The replace button replaces the selected master path in the blend with any other selected path. To see that, let's draw a new path. This time I draw a star and it has more number of vertices than the polygon. But we also need to select the blend path that we want to replace it with. So let's reveal its path property. Now I select the blend path and I can activate it by double clicking on it and selecting any of its points to select its path property without going inside the layer properties. Or we could search for the path properties here as well. I hide these additional properties to make it clear as we don't need these. We can also select more than one path to replace, but for the time being we continue with the one. Let's replace it with the second, which we discussed before. So when I click replace now, it will ask to match the vertices because the star has more points than the polygon object. When I click yes, you can see the blend is updated. The star is replaced with the polygon and the number of vertices for this polygon has also increased to match this star's points. If we enable the spine, it will work as well. With this option, we can reverse the order of the shapes. As you can see, the polygon is on the top and the star is at the bottom. So if we reverse the order of the shapes, we need to select the blend first. Any layer of the blend can be selected. If I click on this button, you can see now the star is on the top and the polygon shape is at the bottom. This button will freeze or unfreeze the blend that will bake out all the expressions to the static values. You can use this if you don't want to animate the blend or want a static design, or you can also freeze the blend temporarily to work faster on other aspects of the project. So now if we click on freeze, it says we forgot to select any layer from the blend. So we select it. And now if we click on freeze again, it will bake out all the expressions to the values and you will see a confirmation message when it is done. Now these controls won't work anymore because the expressions are baked. You can also unfreeze the blend by holding the Alt key and clicking again. And it will be back to its original position with all its expressions. You can also apply other shape properties to the blend from this menu, like offset paths, pucker and bloat, repeater, round corners, etc. For the demonstration purpose and to speed up the process, I reduce the number of shapes. You can see I have more number of shapes than 10, but on the script panel it is showing the default value of 10. So we need to update it to get the current values of the active blend. Now it is showing correct values from this blend. And we can change it to 10 and update the blend. Also we may need to reset the twist values. Now I add the wiggle paths property to this. Let's increase the size to see the effect. I remove it and try pucker and bloat. Need to increase the amount to see the effect more clearly. And now you can see the effect. The same way you can try any of these on the blend. I have also included some sample designs which I have used in the promo video, and you can find these here to see how these are made. You can also find these in the main composition. This blend is created using 3 master paths. The one is very big and the other ones are small. Here is another tiny path from where the blend starts. Otherwise, shapes will appear abruptly from this middle shape while looping without using opacity controls. And the same way, you can also check out the other ones. Have fun with the script and let me know if there are any other queries. Thanks again and see you later.